I don't think I could do this anymore. I don't know why, but I'm okay with walking away from this because there's no way I'm dragging down the lake.
Nearly 20,000 spectators in Madison Square Garden witnessed something they never anticipated on the evening of July 23, 2026. The guy who built a 40-year career on never giving up, Jon Bon Jovi, approached the edge of the platform, put his palm on his chest, and informed a packed audience that he was unable to continue. His bandmates came running to give him hugs. The audience stopped talking, and the cause of it all was far more serious than a sinus infection. The music stopped that night. You might tell that something wasn't right from the first song if you were in Madison Square Garden on the evening of July 23rd. The typical force in John's voice was vanished, leaving behind a thin, strained sound that became worse with each minute. As fans who had attended the previous 7 gigs in this residency could sense right away, this man wasn't having a bad night. In front of 20,000 people who had paid hundreds of dollars to see him make a return, this man's body was failing him in real time. 14 songs were performed with great energy by the band. They would play between 20 and 23 on a typical night during this tenure. When they got to Bed of Roses, John was barely able to finish the vocals, so he moved away from the microphone and allowed everyone in the arena sing the last line for him. The majority of those in the crowd were unaware that they were seeing the beginning of a well-planned comeback. John spoke to the audience with a degree of candor that most performers would never display on stage prior to playing what would turn out to be the night's last song. He informed them that it was not typical of him to let them down and that he was aware that he was doing so. He informed them that they would perform one more song and that he would require their assistance due to severe pain. Pat Monahan, the lead singer of Train, was pulled backstage and came out to assist with the vocals on Livin' on a Prayer. Monahan was actually in the arena that evening as a normal fan and had no scheduled part in the show. John relied on the audience to get through it, even though Monahan did a lot of the singing. He warned the crowd not to discard their ticket stubs when the song was over because he would figure something out. He gave the applauding audience a thumbs up, hugged each member of his band individually, and left the stage. Later, his representatives acknowledged that he had been fighting a sinus illness. Although that was technically accurate, viewers of the first 2 shows were already aware that this was about far more than just a stuffy nose. In the hours following the cancellation, fans on social media were sharply divided. Many remarked they were still in awe of John's effort, despite calling it heartbreaking. One attendee stated that despite everything, John remained their favorite rock star because the audience gave the band their best and the band returned the favor. It was quite concerning to see the same warning flags emerging just 2 weeks into the comeback, according to a Deadline commenter who claimed to have seen the infamous 22 Indianapolis show, the very performance that immediately led to John's surgery. The band had subtly removed several of their most popular songs from the set list and cut the show short 2 nights prior without giving a public reason. This pattern indicated a problem that had been developing for more than 10 years. A voice fading slowly. The vocal issues with Jon Bon Jovi did not begin in 2026. It didn't even begin until his procedure was initially made public in 2022, during one of the most turbulent times in the band's history. In 2013, the roots of this issue were sown, and at the time, very few people outside the tight circle made the connection. During the Because We Can tour in 2013, guitarist Richie Sambora abruptly left the group just hours before a planned performance in Calgary. After spending years in and out of rehab, Sambora subsequently claimed that his exit was due to serious family issues and the necessity to support his daughter. However, the catastrophic effect his departure had on John's voice was something that most people were unaware of. Sambora was more than simply the main guitarist. He was the other half of a vocal duo that had shaped Bon Jovi's sound for 30 years. After Sambora quit, John had to fill his solo parts and all the harmonies Sambora had always handled for the 80 tour dates that remained. John told AARP magazine that after that tour, things started to go wrong and he was unable to determine whether the harm was physical or psychological. By 25, it was getting harder to cover up the signs. A rising breathiness, reduced volume, moments where the pitch would slide. John said on the How to Fail podcast that his body had collapsed beneath him and that he had no idea how awful things had gotten. He made every effort to resolve it on his own. He enumerated every treatment in the Hulu documentary series, Thank You Good Night, including lasers, acupuncture, vitamins, collagen injections, and exercise. Between the ages of 2015 and 2019, he persevered through tours and performances despite the fact that the instrument he relied on the most was gradually failing beneath him. And if you take a time to consider that, the loneliness of knowing that something is wrong with the one thing that defines your entire identity and not being able to cure it no matter what you try is a particular form of anguish that most people will never completely comprehend. Then the pandemic struck. Furthermore, John's voice was not restored by the 2-year touring hiatus that COVID imposed on all musicians worldwide. It revealed the extent of its downfall. The change was evident when Bon Jovi resumed playing in 2022, and John would only have believed the person who eventually told him the truth. The words that made all the difference. John was certain that he had given the audience his heart when he left the stage following a 2022 arena performance in Nashville. He turned to tell his wife Dorothea that everything went smoothly. She gave him a glance and uttered something that would change his entire professional trajectory. She informed him that it wasn't fantastic and that she had witnessed his greatness. Since high school, John and Dorothea have been dating. They got married in 1989 and have been together throughout every stage of Bon Jovi's 40-year career. Later, John told People magazine that although the talk was extremely painful and distressing, she was the best person to give him the truth. On a podcast, he explained how everyone else around a rock star is either a fan who fervently wants you to succeed or a yes man who gets paid. However, Dorothea served as his confessional box since she was the only person he knew who would never deceive him, and see how his brain used that knowledge. He told People that the voice in his head told him it was time to resign as soon as he heard her remarks. It's not time to visit the doctor. It's not time to relax. Initially, he thought it was over. That reveals all of the psychological burden this man had been carrying, possibly for years, without telling anyone. Fear of losing your voice, which is a fundamental aspect of who you are, is not limited to the workplace. It's a crisis of existence. John drove himself to the hospital a few days later. He didn't send a helper. He failed to set up a consultation for the next week. He got into his car by himself and drove because he was so desperate to rescue what little he still had. Even he was unprepared for what he witnessed when the doctors revealed what was truly going on within his throat. The dying cord. John could not have predicted the severity of the diagnosis. He had actually atrophied one voice cord. In the Hulu documentary series, he clarified that vocal cords should seem parallel and have a similar thickness. However, one of his had shrunk to the size of a pinky, while the other had grown to the size of a thumb. Every time the weak cord attempted to sing, the strong cord literally pushed him away. The cord was withering, as he put it. The doctor informed him that voice folds flatten away with age, which is a normal aspect of aging. However, 40 years of playing at the top level and shouting out arena songs 4 nights a week had sped up the process considerably. John was perplexed because he had always been careful with his voice. He had never used drugs or smoked, and he always warmed up before and cooled down after performance. He revealed to The Independent that he was a trained vocalist who had spent 40 years honing his trade, and that he had performed with Pavarotti. He wasn't a novice who had damaged his voice due to negligence. Nevertheless, the device continued to malfunction. By positioning 2 pieces of Gore-Tex within the neck but outside the voice cords, the surgeon carried out a surgery known as medialization. In the documentary series, John referred to it as a vocal cord facelift. In order to restore symmetrical firing on both sides, the cutting-edge implant was made to push the weaker cord back into place. Although the procedure was successful, he would have to fight for 3 years to relearn how to utilize his own voice. John was still unable to commit to a tour 19 months following the treatment. The band was about to release a new record, but it was still unclear if their vocalist would ever perform live again. In the Hulu documentary series, John acknowledged that he experienced many genuine moments of uncertainty during that time, but he continued to find what he called a little ray of hope to drive himself forward, only to be struck in the nose the following day by yet another setback. He stated on the Today Show that in order to accomplish anything, you must be prepared on a physical, mental, and spiritual level, and he was not yet. John's interview with the Sunday Times on April 24th caused a stir in the music industry. He declared that he was done and content if his singing wasn't up to par, and he couldn't be the person he once was. He likened himself to a quarterback who was about to throw his final ball. Then he uttered the words that perfectly encapsulated his fear. He never needed to be the fat Elvis. Something amazing occurred all around John as he battled to rebuild something he wasn't sure could be rebuilt while spending every day in vocal treatment. The line-holding brotherhood. Not a single Bon Jovi member left. No one began searching for alternative projects. Retirement was not mentioned. Behind the drums, Tico Torres remained. David Bryan continued to work behind the keyboard. Even though there was no set date and no assurance that a tour would ever take place, Phil X, Hugh McDonald, John Shanks, and Everett Bradley all showed up for rehearsals, as if one was already planned. In June 2026, John told People magazine that the sacrifices each of them had made were quite different. They assured him that they were by his side during every rehearsal. He claimed that his affection for them had only grown stronger. And if you have ever experienced a horrific event in your own life, you are well aware of how important it is when others in your immediate vicinity refuse to go, even when the outcome is uncertain. A profession is not the only thing that may be sustained by such loyalty. It keeps the individual in the workplace. Even Richie Sambora, who had not played with the group since leaving at the age of 13, openly declared that he would return if John got well. Sambora stated on the Allison Hagendorf show that he had songs ready and that the world needed them if John could regain his voice. The man who may have started the domino effect that resulted in John's vocal degradation was now stating that a comeback was possible 13 years after he had left. That gives you a complete picture of how much was at risk. John made the Forever Tour announcement on the Today Show in October of 2025, Madison Square Garden. 9 nights were sold out. Officially, the comeback had begun. After 16 days of proofing, there was a crash. Madison Square Garden was completely sold out when the house lights went out on July 7, 2026. No opening act took place. When the spotlight touched the stage shortly after 7:30 p.m., Bon Jovi left. John began with a rendition of "With a Little Help from My Friends" in the bluesy gospel arrangement that Joe Cocker made famous. The decision was so well thought out that it nearly hurt. Those lines had a deeper significance than nostalgia after 4 years of silence, surgery, therapy, uncertainty, and terror. John thanked the audience for waiting and mentioned that he hadn't heard from a live audience in 4 years. Opening night reviews were frank yet positive. His voice sounded very different from that of Bon Jovi in the 1980s. Instead of running over the arena floor, he was more motionless on stage, holding the microphone stand or strumming his guitar. However, the set selection of 21 songs demonstrated that he could withstand the physical strain of a complete concert. The return was genuine. Fans from all over the world flew in for the residency as the band settled into a groove over the next 7 concerts. On any given night, at least 5 different languages could be heard in the MSG concourse. Even for a vocalist whose voice has never been affected, 9 gigs in less than 3 weeks is a taxing schedule. It was a calculated risk for a 64-year-old man whose Gore-Tex implants held his vocal cords together. And the fissures had already begun to show by night 6. 2 of the band's most demanding songs, Wanted Dead or Alive and Always, were subtly removed from the set list. At 8 o'clock at night, John's body decided for him. The cost and the promise. On July 23rd, John made a commitment to the audience that was nearly intolerable before he left the stage. He instructed them to keep their ticket stubs since he would find a way to reschedule. He then said something that devastated everyone in attendance. He told them he felt wonderful and that he would see them soon. All 5 European stadium concerts and the 9th and final MSG event on July 26th were still scheduled as of the days after the cancellation. The band's official website still mentioned 3 nights at London's Wembley Stadium in September, Edinburgh's Murrayfield Stadium on August 28th, and Dublin's Croke Park on August 30th. For the band as well as the tens of thousands of fans who had already made travel and hotel reservations from all over the world, withdrawing any of those gigs would have huge financial and psychological ramifications. However, in 24, John drew a line. He declared that he will never be an artist who pushes through subpar performances out of duty or ego. He claimed that he didn't have to be the obese Elvis, the man who was so desperate to save his voice that he drove himself to the hospital by himself in 2022, now had to make the same decision since he believed the surgery would be permanent. What transpired on July 23rd was directly caused by a sinus ailment. The true story, however, is about a guy who has devoted 40 years to providing his audience with nothing less than the best, and a reconstructed body that might no longer be able to fulfill that promise. Resilience was the foundation of Jon Bon Jovi's legacy. He was the young man from Sayreville, New Jersey, who went on to sell over 130 million records worldwide after opening for ZZ Top at Madison Square Garden in 1983. He has persevered through band changes. The death of original bassist Alec John Such in June 2022, 10 years of hidden vocal degradation, surgery that threatened his career, and a 3-year rehabilitation that nearly put him on the verge of retirement. He once told the Sunday Times that his greatest worry was losing the ability to sing completely, and that he would be devastated if he could never do it again. He also said that 60 is different from 50. What Jon Bon Jovi's voice can withstand in the next weeks will determine if the Forever Tour lives up to its name or ends one of rock's most remarkable careers. Not the man who stood at the edge of that Madison Square Garden stage with his hand on his chest and once again chose honesty above performance is the only one who actually knows the answer. Tell us in the comments what you think Jon should do next, and if you think the comeback can overcome this obstacle. This discussion is far from ended, so share it with anyone who has been following this amazing tale.